Welcome to the Laser Podcast. For our fifth episode, we will be talking about the changes to the statutory framework for the early years foundation stage, which are effective from the 1st of September. Vivette and I are really pleased to be joined today by Janet King, who is Sector Manager for Education and Childcare at CASH.
Hi Vasco, hi Janet, such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me along. It's an absolute pleasure to be involved.
Janet, how do you see these changes impacting the content and delivery of the early years qualifications, and which qualifications will be impacted by the changes?
Okay, so first I guess we look very briefly at what those changes are going to be. And of course those changes will be mandated from September this year. And as always, we would strongly advise that when teaching qualifications in the early years and childcare portfolio, delivery refers to the most up-to-date early years statutory framework. I'm just going to refer very briefly now to the government website and the information there to identify some of those key changes that have been made to the framework. So some changes that actually relate to the changes to the educational programmes include the wording in those programmes. Specifically, they are longer, there's more depth, and they contain examples of things that can be done with children. There is a new focus on early language and extending vocabulary, with more examples of how to embed and develop vocabulary skills across all of those 7 areas, in the hope of developing a broad curriculum. There will be some minor changes as well to safeguarding and welfare, in relation specifically to promoting the good oral health of children. The qualifications that this impacts for delivery includes the Level 3 Diploma in Early Years Education and Care, the Level 3 Technical Diploma in Early Years Education and Care, the Level 3 Diploma for the Early Years Workforce, the Level 3 Diploma for Childcare and Education, and the technical version of that qualification, the Level 3 Technical Diploma in Childcare and Education, of course as well the Level 2 Diploma for the Early Years Practitioner. We would always anticipate that there are no changes to the specification, and we expect centres to follow up-to-date guidance, and that's the case here as well. So we don't intend to make any changes to the qualification specification, but we would always expect up-to-date teaching and learning requiring involvement and engagement when teaching to that latest framework.
Oh, thanks Janet. That's good to know that we're not going to see any changes to assessment criteria. However, when we're looking at this, how different do you see the role of the practitioner being on a day-to-day basis with these revisions in place? So for example, adding the more well-being and health with such things as good oral health, how will that affect the day-to-day of running centres?
Well, this could include things like talking to children about the effects of eating too many sweet things, the importance of brushing your teeth. There's not a requirement that settings must carry out supervised toothbrushing, but some settings will choose to do that. And of course, there's no requirement to assess children's oral health. It is important to always remember that the early learning goals summarise the knowledge, skills and understanding that all children should have by the end of that academic year in which they turn 5. So the end of the reception year, and those early years pre-reception providers do not need to use the early learning goals, but the changes are included when you look at the information that's on the website and so on, because you need to see a child's expected level of development by the time they turn 5. So just like it's important, for teachers to engage the early years, it's also important for early years practitioners to know what's happening to children as they move on to that sort of more formal national curriculum at the end of the reception year, when those early learning goals will be assessed. So the early learning goals shouldn't be used as a curriculum. They should be used as an assessment during the summer term of the reception year. And in education, we talk of a broad, balanced curriculum. I would advocate for a broad, balanced, and above all, bold curriculum where practitioners are connected to the children that they care for, that there's an engaging and enabling environment for children. And that really still remains the heart of the framework.
Oh, brilliant. Janet, a lot of the people who will be listening to our podcast are going to be assessors. So what I'm wondering really is, what should assessors be looking for in light of the new framework? What would be indicating good practice or best practice within the workplace when we're looking at trainees?
Okay, so I would say that observation is still very important, but I think what we should be looking for in best practice is how observations are used, how the knowledge of babies and young children is being utilised within that setting by the practitioners to allow for that bold curriculum, if you like, that's making good use of the connections that the practitioners have in terms of the individual children's interests. So the level of engagement that practitioners and of course the student is having with the children, and not an over-reliance of using an observation to sort of track against the early learning goals, but using those observations to actually ensure that real learning is taking place that is meaningful and for the individual children that are being cared for. I'd look for that.
That's really helpful. Clearly, for all those working in assessment, we are looking for continuous professional development, that lifelong learning. If we're to assess well, we need to be up to date ourselves, of course. So will EQAs be looking for any particular form of CPD to show competence to assess early years qualifications in light of these revisions?
We absolutely need to make sure that we keep on top of things that are going on in education and early years, above anything. I think there's seen a lot of changes recently. So I think the EQA would always, your external quality assurer would always look for CPD and CPD that's relevant. That doesn't mean to say it has to be a long drawn out qualification. It doesn't. It can be something that's short and snappy. It can be self-motivated. It could be, reading and showing what you've read and justifying that in your practice. But yes, when you're teaching something that has actually gone through and assessing something that's actually gone through changes like this, the external quality assurer will be absolutely delighted and reassured where training and CPD has been professionally committed to those changes, so it will be seen favourably.
This has been very insightful and will be useful information for a lot of our listeners. Thank you, Janet. Just one final question before we wrap up. If assessment centres have any questions or concerns about the delivery of early years qualifications, who should they speak to?
Okay, if they've got questions about cash, they can speak to their centre. So if they had a centre lead, they could speak to them. The centre lead could liaise with external quality assurers, and external quality assurers would probably link me as sector manager in with that conversation. So yes, start the ball rolling. If it's from a student, to speak to the centre. If the query is from centre, to speak to their external quality assurer, and also have the option to be able to come to me direct. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you both for your time, and thank you to our audience as always. Let me just add, we've created a short 2-minute video which summarises the changes to the framework, and you can find this on our blog at www.lasersys, that's sys.co.uk/blog.
Thank you, Janet. That was really helpful and quite reassuring. I think we know what we need to do now. Thank you very much.
Oh, perfect. You're welcome. Bye-bye.